Change is all around us, especially at work. If you've recently taken on a situation where change is all around you, or you're leading a team where 2025 is going to be a bit different, then this episode is especially for you. Today, I'm sharing my 3-step framework for healing your team and navigating change. Let's get started, shall we? Well, hello, all you beautiful people, and welcome to Project Joyful, the podcast for health-centered leaders. I'm your host, Tracy Tutty, your medical herbalist, neuro-identity evolution practitioner, and high-performance coach. So hey, Project Joyful isn't just about being happy. It's about consciously creating a life you love. It's about remembering how to reconnect with your soul-centered joy. You know, that joy that comes from doing what you love, from living on purpose, and from being in a life that allows you to experience deep joy, moment by moment. It's also about bringing that joy into your workplace and using your skills as a health-centered leader to heal your team. So let's get started, shall we? I've made a career out of turning around broken teams. Here's some of the situations that I've walked into. Finance restructure where the finance manager and the accountant have left and there's no trace of the team process manual. An IT conversion gone wrong, which meant that there were no finance reports to the board in the last 4 months and year end is just 2 months away. Or stepping in to project manage the team because the last 2 project managers were fired. Imagine how that team's feeling. I didn't set out to be the finance team fix-it person. It happened by accident. I was contracting in the UK and I was hired to lead a team which, unbeknown to me, wasn't doing all that well. I turned up and bit by bit fixed what turned up in front of me. My next contract, same thing. 4 contracts in, and that's what I became known for. Along the way, I trained as a stress therapist, then a life coach, then a high-performance coach. Each time applying what I'd learned to what was presenting in front of me. I loved my work. The thrill of uncovering what was the core issue. Lasting change comes from addressing what's at the core. Do that, and the symptoms of dysfunction, well, they simply melt away. It's a bit like life and our health. At that time, I wasn't aware of things like active recovery or identity evolution. That came later in response to my tendency to overextend. I poured myself into those roles. Thrilling in the high-pressure environment. I loved it. I was tired, but I put that down to the business travel or the latest deadline. My body started providing clues. I ignored them, reaching instead for that 3rd coffee to get me going in the morning and a couple of wines at night to numb myself. Well, I thought that was normal because everyone else was doing it as well. Health conditions began to appear. I carried on regardless. Then one day, I simply didn't have the energy to get out of bed. My recovery from burnout and what I learned from that experience is a conversation for a separate episode. Today, I'm sharing my 3-step framework for getting your team on the road to recovery. This is the framework I use to help leaders heal their teams. What's my approach? Well, regardless of what I'm presented with, I always start by addressing the elephant in the room. We begin with an honest conversation about what your team believes has gone on before you arrived. Now, there's a couple of distinctions to tease out first. This conversation is not about the facts. It's about perception. There's no right or wrong. And the purpose isn't to decipher. The purpose is to understand where each member of your team is at, what they need, and for you to discern where your risks are. This is where you get to begin the bonding process by creating space and psychological safety so that your team can talk about how they're feeling, both individually and collectively. Now, here's a hint. Feeling trumps perception of the facts every single time. This is where you assess your superstars, your opportunities, and your TBCs. This is where you assess your flight risks and you create a plan for how you'll respond to that risk. I know it's tempting to rush through this part and get to the what needs to be done bit. But the listening, the empathy, and the caring is the foundation for lasting change and team cohesion. And it's how you build trust as a leader. The second part of the framework runs along the first part. Wherever you can, with integrity and authenticity, layer in hope and build upon a shared goal and common ground. Your job is to provide certainty because a team with certainty feels safe. It's biological. Now, you can provide certainty in 3 key ways. First up, set the standard. Talk about how your team's behaviour will be going forward. Set that standard, communicate that standard, and most importantly, enforce that standard. Talk about the key deliverables, but elevate it by adding emotion and stoking the fire of shared ambition. Let me illustrate this by giving you a real-life example. Remember that team who hadn't been able to deliver any finance reports to the board in 4 months and were 2 months away from year end? My individual conversations with that team led me to discover that they felt embarrassed, embattled, lost, and without direction. Notice how they're feeling. So my conversation at their team meeting talked to that. I began by talking about how they had been feeling. I noticed the nods around the room. Then I called out to their aspirations. We're going to sort this out so that you can hold your head high knowing we're delivering. I want this to be a team that cares for each other and one which you feel proud to be a part of. Lots of nods around the room. Now, I said, here's how we're going to get there. And then I laid out the plan. And once I'd laid out the plan, I asked, what have I missed? What don't I see? Because they're the experts. And then I simply listened. Why? Well, because it's not my plan. It's our plan. So stoke that ambition and build the journey together. This is also the time to be vulnerable. Let them know that you don't have all the answers and that you need them. Talk about your own values and, if it's appropriate, your goals and intentions. Make it easy for them to back you and to like you. The third piece is the hardest. Be accountable. Be clear about how you'll be as a leader and give them permission to remind you when you fall short on that because, well, you're allowed to be human. Use this authentic, vulnerable moment to remind them that you'll do the same for them. You're reinforcing the team standard to them too. In moments of momentous change, like getting a new leader, your team craves certainty. Find ways to help them feel safe through feeling certain. Certainty comes from getting to know you and your expectations, from understanding what's acceptable and not acceptable behaviour, and by choosing to hitch your horse to the same cart and have that cart pulled in the same direction. So if today's episode has got you thinking, here's my invitation to you. Use my experience. Have you stepped into a new team? Is your team navigating a time of momentous change? Let's talk. Book your confidential discovery call with me. The link to my calendar is in the show notes. Sending you lots of love. Bye for now. Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Can I ask you a favour? If our conversation spoke to you today, could you please take a moment to leave a 5-star review? Your review will help people discover this podcast, and together we can create a world where there's even more love and more laughter. And if you want to hear more from the Project Joyful podcast, just click the subscribe button. Bye for now.